Test, test, test. Can you hear it?
Let me get another one. Do you get another one? I think so. Just it's not sticking on.
All right, good morning.
Test, test, test.
Good morning. I think we can hear you. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Yeah,
Hold it down.
just hold that down. That should do it.
Everybody.
All right. Well, welcome. Everyone, my name is Kevin Taylor. I work for WWF, serve on the America's All-In team, a subnational coalition of institutions across the United States. Thanks for everybody for joining us today and those watching the stream. We've got a wonderful panel to kick off our second day here at the America's All-In Action Center at COP29. We're going to have a discussion about community-led action for climate and environmental justice. I'll open with some brief remarks here, and then I want to introduce our panel, and we'll get into some discussions about their work and their experience. So for those sort of unfamiliar and new to this area of environmental justice, it stems from social movements led by people of color advocating for environmental protection in their communities, seeking to address inequities caused by harmful policies that promoted industrial development filled with polluting practices in their neighborhoods. Climate justice is an extension of this movement, as climate impacts, of course, exacerbate risk and threats to underserved and overburdened communities. Decades of work from the climate and environmental justice movement has shown how a history of injustice has harmed communities, pushing and educating local, state, and federal governments to enact policies and investments to address those inequities, seeking to end the harm, advance both investments and better practices to repair the damage as well. In the last 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration has enacted historic piece of legislation through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, bringing billions of dollars worth of public investments on climate, environment, and renewable energy. In connection with these investments, it's also put forth transformational policies like the Justice 40 initiative, seeking to deliver at least 40% of overall federal benefits to disadvantaged communities. As many of you know, we recently had an election in the U.S., and we expect it's unlikely that the incoming administration under President-elect Trump will lead on climate and environmental justice in a way that Americans and the world needs. But we will see, and we will be sure to press and continue to push on these issues. We'll need to build on the last 4 years and move forward with a whole of society effort to get this done. I want to introduce our panelists now, starting on the end. Mayor Martha Guerrero from the city of West Sacramento, California. She was elected mayor in 2020. She's the mother of twin daughters and proud grandmother of 2, I see here, adorable grandchildren. She's held many advisory seats within the county government and was also a member of the West Sacramento Planning Commission from 2013 to 2016. Thank you, Mayor, for being here.
Thank you.
In the middle here, Jamez Staples, President, Renewable Energy Partners Incorporated. Mr. Staples is President and CEO, a minority-owned solar installation and developer company focused on creating opportunities for communities of color to participate in the emerging clean energy sector. He is also a founder of Northgate Development, a real estate development firm, and has been recognized locally, regionally, and nationally for his work in the green energy and economy sector. To my left, immediately here, Dr. Crystal Upperman, Senior Manager at Deloitte and board member of We Act for Environmental Justice. At Deloitte, Dr. Upperman works with clients to build resilient, economically strong, and sustainable communities. Her focus is on practical solutions that protect people, livelihoods, and infrastructure, all in aim to strengthen communities. And Dr. Upperman, as I mentioned, also serves as a board member for We Act. And then last but not least, Cheryl Kopong, Executive Project Manager, the Chisholm Legacy Project. Ms. Kopong is a lifelong organizer driven by a mission to uplift and advance the global Black community. She serves as a project manager at the Chisholm Legacy Project. In this role, she leads several key initiatives, including Black-based building, the Global Afro-Climate Justice Collaborative, and alignment across Black communities, amongst many other activities. Thank you all so much for being here. I'll kind of open first question for you, Cheryl. Would love to hear more, of course, about what the Cheryl Legacy Project is doing. Of course, this is inspired by Shirley Chisholm's life. She's the daughter of Caribbean immigrants, first African-American woman elected to Congress. And so tell us a little about what the mission of the organization is, your role, and in particular, I'd love to hear sort of how you see some of the federal policies that we've seen passed, how they've helped, where are the gaps still, and work that's still yet to be done in the climate environmental justice movement. The microphone to you like that.
Yes, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you all. So a little bit about the Chisholm Legacy Project. We are an environmental justice resource hub that work directly with frontline communities to help them to build capacity. I like to say that we're a manifestation hub, right? So we work with Black liberation organizations and communities to dream what a brave new world looks like, to help to give the tools for self-determination, for resilience, for capacity, in order for us to kind of as a community decide what we want our lives to look like. We know that we as human beings all deserve access to land, to water, to clean air, and to the ability to decide what we want our lives to look like. And so that's a lot of what we work with. We honestly are like a hodgepodge of an organization. We do a lot of different things. We have a Black-based building convenings where we work with Black liberation organizations across the different regions of the United States. We come together, we vision, we dream, we build collective power, and things of that nature. And I think your other question was asking about how we've seen some of these bills and things that have been introduced to help. So one of the things that I like to say is, and that we've been talking about amongst our community, is that I think that the intention is there, right? Like and excuse me if I look at my notes here, but the intention is there to help out communities, right? Because in some ways we've never seen this amount of money at a governmental level be proposed to help all of these communities and organizations. But on another hand, there are so many organizations and communities who don't even know what Just 40 is, who wouldn't even know where to look to have access to these resources. And so while the intention is there, and while we love what it is that has been put on the floor for what these bills are proposing and want to do, there needs to be better pathways for communities that are the most marginalized and disenfranchised, because a lot of times, even though the resources are there, they don't have access to them.
So your work is going to be touching on how to do some education and outreach.
Yes.
Connecting those people to those opportunities.
Correct.
What are some of the, in addition to that sort of awareness gap, are there other things that you see as barriers that are still to overcome, or areas where the funding is still not touching communities?
Yes, absolutely. Capacity is a really big one, right? So it's like, even when you do identify these organizations, they don't necessarily have the tools needed in order to do the work that needs to be done. And then another thing that I think that we've been seeing is as far as like language. So a lot of the situation is that like, when we get into these rooms and into these situations and at these amazing events like COP, right, there's a lot of academics, there's a lot of policymakers, there's a lot of people who have been doing this work for a long time, and then there's a lot of community members who are doing the work in real life, but they don't necessarily have the language, the words, the actual things on paper, so there's like a disconnect, if that makes sense. So one of the barriers that I see in addition to awareness is also like the connection, I would say, that's made between the work that's being done and also the people who are looking to support this work. And so, yeah, I think that we as people who are within this space can do a better job of talking the language of everyday people. We're here for the people, we're here to uplift the people, and so we have to speak in a way that they can understand.
Thank you so much. Let me go next to Mayor Guerrero. Um, Obviously, you're coming at this from a local government perspective, in part. A lot of the incentives and programs under the federal legislation are directed towards local governments, and would love to hear sort of what are some of the key climate priorities that you have in West Sacramento, and how you've leveraged some of these federal dollars to support your work, and what are the other issues that you see your residents facing, and some of the actions that the city has taken to address those?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to be here and to share what's going on in West Sacramento and some of the things that we have experienced. West Sacramento was an industrial town, heavy ag, and as a result of it being incorporated, it grew. There was a lot of housing that was going to be planned, and so we've transformed the riverfront, heavy industrial riverfront, into housing, infill housing. And with that, we had to look at our climate action plan, because one of the biggest growth is the greenhouse gases. So working with Sacramento in partnership, there are a number of projects that we've implemented where we obtained federal funding. One is the streetcar that is being planned to share between West Sacramento and Sacramento. And that is a huge benefit in order for us to get people transported around in the city. The other being VIA. VIA is a on-demand rideshare program which was implemented in 2018. We were the first on-demand rideshare program through VIA. That is utilizing an app so that individuals can ask for the on-demand rideshare, and it was initially in West Sacramento. We've expanded it to Sacramento. As a result of that, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law has expanded it to other parts of the nation, and VIA has grown internationally to many cities now. And so the benefit of VIA has helped more significantly in our disadvantaged community, our oldest city, part of the city, where in California it's 12%, in West Sacramento it's 22% of the individuals who live below the poverty line. So out of that percentage, 69% of the VIA users come from the disadvantaged areas. They are seniors, they are female, and they also are individuals that don't have transportation, and this is their only mode of transportation to get around to the city, to go to work, to go to the grocery store and get things. So it's been a huge advantage, and we continue to maintain VIA as we are continuing to expand. So with our climate action plan, we've also have seen our biggest risk, as we heard from the previous panel, flood protection. And we were fortunate to be able to receive federal funding to continue our progress with the Southport Levee setback. And with the Southport Levee setback, we have established a really beautiful habitat where we have restored what has been there before and along the river. And so with that, we have just some wildlife that continues to grow there. The levee is now going to be used as a big bike and pedestrian and outdoor recreation area. And so throughout the entire city, that has been another area of priority, is to continue to build bike and pedestrian access ways. So we're looking at 60 miles of that throughout the entire city, because in order for us to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, we have to have other modes of transportation. Now with all of this, we have to incorporate, as a result of looking at Justice 40, we are more intensely applying some of what is incredibly important is the input from the community as we continue to progress and ask for funding. And the input of the community has grown. It has been, they're more heavily involved in seeing what is happening as these projects are being implemented. And we also, through the Bloomberg Climate Action Plan, are involving our youth So with that, our youth are learning, to do bike buses, just to get out of the vehicles, and also looking at other ways of sustaining, the food, just making sure that we take a look at the recycling programs. So just a number of projects through our climate action plan that we are implementing.
Gomez, let me come to you next. So you're a renewable solutions provider, your company. Your business model is rooted in delivering social and economic benefits for communities, including building a pathway for workforce development, job creation. Which ways have you seen federal resources increase your ability to support these kind of social, economic, environmental benefits for communities? What are some of the lessons learned from leveraging those resources? And again, same question, so the challenges and gaps, things that you see missing that you still are trying to get after as you're working to scale solar development.
Well, thank you for having me here also. First, I'd like to say that the federal resources that have been deployed by the Biden-Harris administration are going to be a godsend to the industry. When you see public sector get involved at the level that we have seen from the Biden-Harris administration, it has been like unprecedented. And this what was it, $27 billion that was allocated to the Environmental Protection Agency, and I don't know how many billions of dollars from the Department of Energy that are going to come to this industry. It's a market signal letting the industry, right, but the world know that America's all in, right? And in addition to that, it's actually leveraging these federal resources for the purposes of activating job creation, which is a big deal. So when we talk about the Justice 40 initiative, that's also a signal that the federal government is actually making an investment into underserved populations and creating opportunities for people who haven't traditionally been engaged. And so with that, those resources are creating jobs, and so job training programs. And so Northgate Development owns a 22,000 square foot building that we're turning into a training center in the heart of North Minneapolis, which is an underserved neighborhood, so that people can get to the program so that they can actively participate in these emerging sectors of the economy and sustainability. And so we've heard about the issue of access, we've heard about the issue of people understanding and knowing what's out there. We partner with nonprofit organizations, Minneapolis Climate Action, and others to work together to make sure that we have this engagement at the community level. Just because we're private doesn't necessarily mean that we're just about making money, right? We are about making money, but we are equally rooted in community. Our offices are in that building, in the heart of North Minneapolis. And so our objective has been to make sure that everyone has access to these pathways of opportunity, to make sure that everyone is participating. And so those resources, we're doing a project with Xcel Energy, the city of Minneapolis, which is a Resilient Minneapolis project. And those projects are going to ultimately go on the roofs of Minneapolis public school buildings, which are going to allow us to own the facilities, the energy producing facilities, that are going to ultimately allow us to sell power to the district at a discounted rate, so that the district can do more of what they actually are employed to do, and deliver education to young people, right? And in partnership with that, what we are also doing is at the training center, which is kitty corner from one of those facilities and 2 blocks away from one of those facilities that will have solar and battery storage. Those facilities will ultimately, those same students that go to those schools will have access to job training programs so they can participate on those projects. So they'll learn about solar, battery storage, microgrid controls, as well as have a resilience hub in case if the power ever goes out. And so we're also using funds to do a project on the Science Museum too. So
That's great to hear you. We were in Philadelphia. You can hear me okay? We were in Philadelphia earlier this year at a similar facility that's training people in green retrofit solar installations. I can hear myself better if I don't have the headphone on.
you'll have it, yeah.
Let's see if this is a little bit clearer, a bit better there. So we saw some of the similar work. They were accessing federal resources to expand their green retrofit, training adults and also kids. There were 8th grade high school kids learning how to install solar panels, learning trades. so they can go into clean energy careers as well. Dr. Upperman, I come to you next. You've got a unique perspective a little bit coming from Deloitte. You serve as a consultant for government entities, private business. You are also serving on the boards of several organizations. Over these past 4 years of federal climate policy and investments, what has that meant for the work that you do as an advisor to companies and governments and as a leader of the National Environmental Justice Organization?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to WWF and America's All-In for this invitation to speak on this topic for the second time in a row. Last year we had the opportunity to have a conversation about climate justice, and now reflecting 1 year later, things are drastically different. I have to say that I have the pleasure and opportunity to help public sector clients implement much of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And what that has meant, over the duration since those two bills have been passed, it's really brought environmental justice into the national stage. So it's a niche topic. It's a topic that has recently garnered national attention, and that's critically important. Aside from that, this focus on the idea of environmental justice as a whole, and also the climate policies that we've seen implemented, it has fundamentally changed the way in which many of the executive agencies approach their work. The panel before this was, with HEMA and NOAA, and they were talking about how there's more intergovernmental collaboration between offices and also intragovernmental collaboration between agencies, all to address and assuage climate risk for the purposes of making sure that those highly burdened and also low-income communities, the communities that are most vulnerable, are being considered into being implemented. So that's one thing. But aside from that, these investments have had an opportunity to make sure that both the private and public sectors prioritize sustainability and climate resilience. We know prior to this enabling environment that we're seeing and have seen in the federal and the national federal government, industry has participated, but there's been a lot of action by NGOs and disparate actors and foundations to partner and collaborate. And with the national attention given, it's created an opportunity where these existing partnerships can be catalyzed to then help industry and also the federal government do better for communities as a whole. So that's one thing. I've also seen, and we've seen across interactions with our clients, we've seen greater collaboration between the entities and businesses and also nonprofits. They're all coming together to try and solve the issue of climate justice and climate risks. So a key aspect across the board, and some folks have mentioned, is like those bills and policies has made it really clear for everything that the federal government does and everything that the money that's being put into communities, that it has a community focus. And it prioritizes the lived experience of those who are most adversely impacted. And this reminds me, and it's similar to when Hurricane Sandy decimated parts of the Northeast corridor of the U.S., and you had the implementation of Rebuild by Design. And what Rebuild by Design did was it invested money to rebuild after the destruction, but it required a very democratic process by which community members engaged with key planners and the federal government to co-create the solution of how they would rebuild. And that went through a series of processes. There were community meetings, there were competitions, there were engagements with political officials within the community and also community members to select what type of the redesign they wanted. And it also made sure that the infrastructure being designed and developed had multiple benefits for the community. So you're not just building a bridge for the sake of building a resilient bridge, you're building a resilient bridge that now provides access to waterways or provides access to a park or provides access to recreation. So I think about it in the context of when we say engaging the community and making sure the community is involved in the process, it's not just for the sake of the community being engaged, but to make sure that the decisions and the solutions are reflective of community needs. So I say all of this to say, my work has drastically changed for the better. I mean, as an advisor, I've been able to help government clients navigate these new decisions, these new regulations, the new funding opportunities to make sure that there is efficacy behind the benefits that they intend to deliver to communities. And we've also seen an uptick in the need for program integrity. There was a mention of Justice 40. Well, to showcase that those benefits are actually accruing where they're supposed to accrue, there needs to be an evaluation of that overall. And what that means is just good government. There's been policies put in place to render good government.
Thanks so much. And you mentioned with us last year at COP28 in Dubai. I'd love to hear from each of the panelists just briefly as to kind of what is your goal for coming to COP this year, and for some of you who've been to COPs previously. What are you hoping to get out of your time here? Obviously, we all know it's a commitment of time and resources to make the trip. What are you hoping to get out of your time here? What messages on these issues that we're discussing are you hoping to bring and connect with some of the audiences here? Happy to pass to you first.
Oh, sure.
As a recent attendee
Yeah.
at last year's COP.
Well, I think for me, it's mostly about if you are not present, you're not considered and thought of. And there are so many topics that happen across the entirety of the 2-week duration. It's practically impossible for any one person to keep track of all of those. So I really appreciate the question around like what is resonating with you as you're here. And I have to say for me, it's the conversation around carbon markets. There's been a lot of call towards determining the rules around carbon markets across the board. And now that that's been placed on the agenda, seeing how that germinates and lands on paper is really critical and important. But for me, there's another aspect that I'm here for that worries and concerns me, and Cheryl mentioned some of this, is that the access and the barrier to entry for many. I think of COP as it is the grand ball of climate. It's similar to if you were invited by the royal family to have a meal and chat about bagels. That barrier to entry is very high. You literally have to know decorum, you have to know manners, you have to know etiquette. You also have to understand whether or not your conversation is happening over tea versus dinner versus lunch. And you have to learn all of those rules of engagement before you can even sit down and chat about bagels. And that's what this convening actually is. It is a convening that is very highly sophisticated, that the barrier to entry is very high. So I recognize Cheryl's mention in regards to that. So I try to, aside from being here for the purpose of chatting and learning a little bit more about what is being signaled for the next year, for me it's also engaging with Indigenous communities and understanding what they're thinking about, understanding what their challenges are, and being able to hear directly from them around how they are enabled to engage and whether or not they are able to engage and what the barriers are. I think it's also been commendable to see youth engagement this go round. The youth has come in with full force, making sure that their voices are heard. So engaging with youth has also been a really key aspect of my time spent here. So.
So as a business person who's interested in value proposition for community also, I'm here because I have a very strong interest in learning about the global entities that are here and what they're doing to empower folks that are at the lowest at the bottom, right? And so how do they do that in a very intentional way when these policies, right? Because if everybody commits to 100% renewable energy and you just bring any major entity to come in and do it, are you engaging the people who can actually do the work in their own community, right? And so that's one of the things that I want to see and learn more about what's happening around the world. I want to learn how they're doing it. We saw what our government has done. They've made a substantial investment. They put requirements on some of those investments. And so I want to see how it is that we can ultimately learn other elements that we can bring and start to, even with this existing administration, how do we encourage them to leverage the private sector to do the work that we still need done regardless, right? And that youth element, right? I think that's extremely important because all of our work is local, regardless of how we want to look at it. Yeah, the federal government at whatever level however they decide to respond to what's happening here where we are within COP, but all this stuff happens at a local level. And so I want to see what other countries that have had these challenges with leaders that haven't necessarily been all in, right? How they're responding and what they're doing at the local level, so we could possibly adopt some of those elements from a private and public perspective.
Thank you. Is it gonna reach? All right. Oh yeah, I could have used that one, I guess. I am here to get my Delta Sky Miles up. No, I'm just kidding. I am here with the Chisholm Legacy Project in the capacity of so many different things. First of all, we're here with the Global Afro-Descendant Climate Justice Collaborative, as you mentioned earlier, to help to connect environmental justice activists across the Black diaspora. We're here to try to get UNFCCC recognition at that level in the same way that the women's groups are recognized, the youth groups are recognized, indigenous people are recognized, Afro-descendants should be recognized as one of the largest and most affected demographics of the climate crisis, period, point blank. But we're also here with the understanding that, as you said, if we're not in the room, a lot of times we're ignored. And even if we are in the room, we're ignored, right? We see a lot of times at these high-level negotiations and in these conversations, the most affected communities are there only for show, for lip service, and a lot of times are not considered when it comes to the true decision-making process of how their communities will be the most affected. As frontline communities and as people who are on the brunt end of the crisis. And so, yeah, I'm here with the knowing and understanding that the global north has a huge responsibility to the global south for all of the extraction that has happened. We see with these, with these bills and the things that we're talking about here that, America is trying to be all in the best ways that we can. We have a lot of work to do. It's beautiful to see this process starting and this work being done, but there's still a lot of conversations to be had. There's still a lot of community people who need to be a part of these conversations, who need to have a seat at these tables, and not only who need to have a seat at these tables, but who need to be leading these conversations, right? Because we know that frontline communities are the ones with the solutions. They have the relationship to the land, they've been tending to the land, and the answers to climate solutions are with the community. So I'm here to talk to listen, to learn, and to see how we can best uplift those voices. Is that mic gonna? Okay.
Testing? Yes, here we are. Well, I missed the first 27 COPs until we were invited as mayors to join and to be in the Blue Zone. And that gave me a great opportunity in Dubai to be able to see what COP is. And in the Blue Zone area, to be able to engage with other mayors, which was incredibly well attended, to be able to help each other understand from mayors all over the world, to share, what our experiences are, best practices, what we can do as a city to improve our little communities. And we also saw some of the challenges in financing some of these changes and how, the financing is incredibly important in so many levels. And so what I've learned here is just the diverse engagement that we have here. In last year's COP, it was incredibly large, and the exhibits were just enlightening to be able to see, what it is that is going on all around the world. And here I'm looking forward to engaging once again with my peers, but also among other countries to see where we are, to get a pulse as to what we've accomplished since last year and what we can do to continue to pursue change and to work collaboratively as America is all in to make sure that we stay engaged. Now, I'm really grateful that I have, our staff, Stephanie Chan and Seamus Laffey, and also my partners, which includes VIA, Krista and Daniel, who we are making sure that on an international level, we make those changes because we know that ahead of us at the federal level, we are having a change in the administration. So that is another element that we probably did not expect when I first planned coming here. Now we have to take a look at the world impact of this new federal administration.
Well, let me pick up on that thread a little bit and continue with you, Mayor, if you'd like, and then others welcome your thoughts as well. As you noted, of course, we are headed into a new administration. One we expect will be a sharp contrast in a lot of ways to the previous administration on climate and these issues. what are some of the strategies that you think about? Obviously, we have been here before in many ways as well. In the first Trump term, what are some of the strategies that you all will be looking to navigate this next 4 years? How can, certainly would love to hear how this whole of society effort represented by America's All In and many of our other partners, how can we support you? But would just, like to hear your thoughts on, again, we're a week out from the election, so we're all still processing and strategizing, but some initial thoughts you might have.
Well, in my testing, all right, here we go. So my experience, cities, have the ability to be nimble and to make the positive impact. And as a result of the policy implementation through Justice 40 and also the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and financing that has helped us make that difference at the local level, we are going to be able to continue to do that. And what we've seen through VIA, for example, is that other cities in the U.S., where, for example, Arlington, Texas, with the Republican mayor, has seen the benefit of VIA. So we do anticipate that we have bipartisan support, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at, where we can find common ground and continue to build on that. Now, we're very fortunate that we have our flood protection funding continuing to come in, because that's very important. But as far as the changes in climate, where we have extreme heat and weather conditions, we will partner with our faith-based community, as you heard earlier, as a question, how are they getting involved? And we do have a great partnership where we have heating and cooling centers, but also reaching out to our most vulnerable populations. We do have a lot of mobile homes and individuals that are unhoused. And so doing the outreach and connecting with people, to keep them, hydrated, to also provide cooling centers or warming centers wherever they may need at times when it gets too cold. So these are some areas that I feel that as a city we are going to continue to move towards affordable housing, and also find ways to continue our bike and pedestrian pathways and encourage people. So that'll be a change in our behavior, just to do that at the local level, to encourage others to do that. And as we see what we have accomplished, to continue on the national and international stage, sharing what we can do as a city.
Hi, yes, thank you. We know that it's a really frightening time in a lot of our communities as a Black woman, but I do want to reiterate and bottom line the fact that Black and Indigenous people are resilient. It's in our DNA. And that's not just me saying it, but like we survived genocide in our own land. We survived the transatlantic slave trade. So we're resilient by design, and we survived 4 years, and we'll survive another 4. But I will say that if we're asking what we can do during this time, during these next 4 years, when there's such an overt attack on Black, Indigenous, people of color, minorities, poor people, et cetera, there is a bill that was introduced, HR 9495, that threatened to give domestic terrorist status to nonprofit organizations. It was voted no, but I mean, that's just to say that it would give unprecedented power to the incoming administration to be able to silence the voices of people who are speaking out on behalf of the most marginalized communities. So what can we all do? What can you all do? We need to build collective power. We need to band together. We need to sit in rooms and strategize and have conversations. We need our allies, our white allies, to stand up, to put themselves on the line, to protect us, and to come together to create a fort, a safety net around us, because we know that these are about to be some really dangerous times. But I do believe we're on the winning side, and I think that our enemies know that, which is why they're trying to have such a pointed effort in order to silence us. And so, yeah, I would say building collective power, having more conversations like these, having more panels like these, and having more pointed strategic efforts is something that needs to happen more.
So the question was again, Kevin.
We're heading into a very new policy environment with this new administration. Again, we've been here before. We sort of understand what provinces are. but sort of what are the strategies, tactics you're thinking of to navigate this next 4 years?
Well, I think that the incoming administration is all about business, from what I've kind of gathered, right? And I think we need to look at that from a private business perspective. We need to look at that as an advantage, and partner with our local communities to ultimately have the impacts that we want to have. And I believe that leveraging the tax credits that are currently out there for solar and other clean energy investments, we need to definitely utilize those to catalyze larger industry, private industry partners, to bring them to the table. Look at this as, because solar is the fastest growing job category in the country, in addition to all the sustainability mechanisms that it ties directly to in terms of batteries, electric vehicles, and all the other things. And we need to use that. We need to use what's currently out there, and just like the Lord said, what's in your hand, right? Use what's in your hand. We already have these things. They're already in place, right? And so we need to use those, and we need to use, as a private person, private business person, we need to use the community, the people who are underserved, right? The people that were just referenced by Cheryl here, and look at our infrastructure and figure out how to harden our infrastructure so that we can make sure that we can respond to the things that need to be responded to in terms of cooling centers, resiliency hubs that we're doing in Minneapolis, and all the other things that are happening. And so as a way to do that, those tax credits are going to be critical, right? And talking to these larger entities that are out there and it's just bringing it all to bear. I mean, the table's already made. All we need to do is basically sit down and eat, because the work has already been done.
If I can offer a little bit of perspective and also optimism, I've had the benefit and just privilege to be able to do this climate adaptation work for a pretty long time. And I reflect on the past 4 years as very unprecedented in terms of the amount of investment and national level policy to create an enabling environment. But prior to that, many actors were still doing this work. They were still creating resiliency within communities. You had philanthropy through like 100RC. You had a whole host of other actors coming together. You had C40 bringing mayors across the globe together, and also domestically in the U.S. to address resiliency issues in local communities. So I think there's an opportunity for partnerships to become a bit more congealed and hardened in the future. I think that we've been equipped with doing it before and will continue to do it again. But I also think that nothing beats an enabling environment, of course, but I think that the community actors out there are well prepared to continue forging partnerships that can show up at a state and local level across private industry and also across local governments to enable that there's, advanced progression on this issue and topic. Yes, having a national level policy is all phenomenal and great, but I think that those in the community are well equipped to continue doing the good work regardless.
I appreciate those answers from everybody. I think I sort of hear some themes of doubling down on community building. We've got those communities, we've got those partners. Let's expand and grow those. We've got some momentum as well, as you're saying. Policy that's in place. Let's defend and expand that work and take advantage of the efforts that the momentum we've been able to build the last 4 years, and beyond. So appreciate all those answers. I want to sort of a final question here. You talked on it, Jamez, the sort of private sector, and Cheryl Dr. Urban would love to hear your thoughts as well on this. We know that private sector is huge influence and stake in tackling the climate crisis, and especially in incorporating community benefits into their work and investments they make. What is something you want to tell your colleagues, your clients, your colleagues, Jamez, in the private sector, for them to know about how to prioritize meaningful engagement with frontline communities and integrating community benefits into their development strategies?
Well, first off, for the companies that are really serious about this work, and even those that aren't, right? Just look at the benefits that you're going to that you have as a result of the work that comes from it, right? You have the opportunity to take a strong position on your energy bill, right? I mean, you have the ability to hedge, and that doesn't. You can't really do that on a lot of different things. Like if you're a grain farmer, you don't know what the season's going to be next year, right? But you can do that for 25, 30 years when you're talking about solar, right? When you're talking about battery storage, you can make sure that you have uninterruptible power by putting battery storage as a part of your system. You have the ability to, and by incorporating community in that, what you're doing is you have the ability to take a position and say, I can sponsor through a foundation. Say I'm a big company. I can sponsor through my foundation an educational program to help young people in an underserved or even a regular neighborhood that's within their proximity. We want to make sure that we have a workforce to do this, right? And that's ultimately going to bend the cost curve down, right? And when you're bending cost curves down because you have more workforce to do the stuff that needs to be done, now it starts to become more adaptable for everybody else within your sphere, right? And so that's the kind of things that we need to be thinking about, not taking a polarization perspective on it. We need to be thinking about how we can use what we have to do the good intentionally.
And I mean, for me, I think about it as like the community and the members of the community are customers. If you're thinking about it from the vantage point of a private entity, and you want business continuity, and with wanting business continuity, there has to be an enabling environment to make sure that there is no disruption in your ability to produce or deliver. So, say for instance, the healthier community, the more likely it is for community members to be able to own a home. That creates a grand scale of opportunity for the number of solar panels you're able to install on homes, and then that creates a enabling business environment. So I look at it more in the context of, as a private entity, either you are part of the community, and along with the community members, you're a steward of that community, and it requires a measure of engagement because the community members, in turn, are also your customers. So I think it's cyclical, and there are enabling environments that shouldn't be overlooked. And it definitely, there are win-wins across the board. I think we often get marred in the controversy of it all, but they're win-wins in my opinion.
Appreciate those thoughts. Yeah, I think it's certainly true that people are looking for opportunity right now. They're looking for relief, obviously looking for justice, but part of that is opportunity, and there is an opportunity, I think, from all of the work that each of you is doing to help provide some of those things, and through the clean energy transition, our climate action broadly is about providing opportunity and health in these places. So we've got a few minutes here. I'd love to pass it to anyone in the audience that may have a question for our panelists. Open that to, yeah. Let's see if that one will.
Thank you. Ryan Finnegan with the WWF team. This might be a question for Cheryl in the first instance, but curious from everybody. One of the initial points that you made, Cheryl, was on building power with people who don't necessarily have the language of climate and environmental justice, or like that's not like their organizing principle in an initial capacity. And I'm thinking a lot about just the intersectionality of climate and the intersectionality of environmental justice. And there's a lot of like climate advocates out there, or would-be climate advocates, that don't know that they are, or would never use that language to describe their involvement in the mission and in the work. So curious about how you think we can be going about building this power over the short term or the near term, but then also kind of like with an eye towards the longer term, building off of so much work that's happening to date.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that question. I think it really starts with like what Chisholm Legacy Project does is we do a lot of convenings. We do a lot of landscape reports. We do a lot of, we help communities build action plans. Like we go to the people because the people know what they want. And then it's like, as us who are coming in with that knowledge and expertise of specific language, if you can go in and you talk to people and you ask them things about their material conditions with which they tell you, then you can then turn around and like use that in these rooms and in these places where there's more technical things that are occurring and happening. So I think that it's just like an intentionality that has to come from us who are within this space to like say, you know what, we know what it is that these entities are specifically looking for, and then we also know what the communities are doing. And in order to do that, you do have to know what the communities are doing. Like, you do really have to be in community. And so one of the ways that we can build that collective power is reaching out to more frontline organizations who are building capacity and who are working with people who are on the ground. Have those people in the room at the round table when we're making these decisions, when we're writing these things into place, with working at so many different levels with like our government, with the NGOs, with specific private businesses. Like, all of us are represented here on this panel for that reason. I can tell it's intentional. Yeah, like, we need to be having these conversations because we're bringing it all from our respective demographics, and then we're all on the same page. And like you said, it's about opportunity. Like, it's about being able to give people access to like the things that they need in order to like live normal lives. So yeah, more of these kinds of conversations at multiple levels, intentionally. Like, if there's people who are on y'all's teams who can reach out to, who need lists, if you want to reach out to me, and like I said, we work nationally. So like, we have Black-based building convenings. We just got back from the Midwest. We did one. We were in Detroit. We had a lot of organizations that were from Minneapolis, actually. We're doing one in the South. We did one in the Northeast. We were in Rhode Island. We're having conversations at these local levels to take these things then back, and then to also work with government entities, and then to also work with businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So we need all of those individual pieces in order to move forward.
I would just add to that, for those that are economically challenged, they're always looking for an opportunity, right? And if there's an opportunity to do something that's a twofer, if you will, right? I can help the climate, I can sustain myself, and I can create a value proposition that will help support my family. It changes the dynamic substantially, right? And so that's where we stand from a private perspective, and 1 foot in business and 1 foot in community. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it changes the level of it changes the commitment. It changes how, because now I'm not only doing something that can help save my mother on her light bill, but I'm also earning a living, and I feel good about doing it. It's a sense of pride, and then it creates a level of self-determination through that process also.
Maybe one more question if anybody has one. If not, well, I think that's a great point to end on. As you said it very, very well, Cheryl. I think intentionally bringing this panel together to bring a variety of perspectives. Obviously, climate change affects us in a multitude of ways. So we've got to attack it in a multitude of ways from a lot of different backgrounds and experiences. And I appreciate all of you bringing your experience to this important conversation. We'll be sure to have many, many more. I hope all of you have a productive and successful COP. But thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for our audience in joining us as well and listening to this important panel. Thank you.
Thank you.